Hey, Auntie.
Hello, 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 family. We are back, your favorite aunties. And boy, have we got a good one for you tonight. So, I will start by introducing myself. I am Paige Means Hopper, the author of Healing the Wounds of American Slavery and the founder of the movement of the same name. And tonight we have with us Auntie Genoa and Auntie Rose, and you'll find out a little bit more about who they are later. But I really want to focus on our special guest tonight. We have Christy Sanders Lasher. Hi, Christy.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hey.
And so Christy is the author of a book called Naturally Curly, and it's the memoir of her life. And so since it's her life, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to her so she could tell us a little bit more about herself and what it is that we're going to be listening to and experiencing tonight. Go ahead, Christy, take it away.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody. So I am a pastor's wife. I'm 41 years old, live in Texas. I've got 3 kids. I am biracial. My mom was white. She has now passed away for about 12 years. And my dad is Black. I grew up in Dallas, the Dallas area, and the area and time where I grew up was very, there was a lot of racial tension, and I did not grow up with my dad or his side of the family at all. I only grew up with my mother and her side of the family, and so I grew up a lot confused about my identity. And it wasn't until much, much later, it's only been a few years ago, that I have discovered my true identity and who I am and being able to celebrate that. So
that's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for opening up your heart. I said when I read your book, I ended up with 12 pages of notes, and it was really that deep, that dense. And what I feel that you did is you flipped your heart inside out so that we could see what this phenomenon is really all about, right? Because as I was saying earlier to the ladies when we were in preparation, I said, a lot of us, we approach this topic as African Americans, Black Americans, with the idea that, when people who are light skinned or they're biracial, half Black, half white, they're passing as white because they just want the privilege of being white. But what I discovered as I was reading your book is something quite different. And so I was pleasantly surprised to learn more truth about the depths of what this topic is really all about. So as I always do every single time that we do the show, I'm going to read from my book first, Healing the Wounds of American Slavery. And when I wrote down all of my notes and came up with all of my questions and comments in my own notes, I took what I got out of Christy's book and I took my book with a scalpel to her work and kind of looked to see where all the wounds were. We've got feedback. Can we take care of that, please? So what I discovered is that the main wounds that I saw present were fear and rejection. So I'm going to start with those. And audience, by the way, we would love for you to participate tonight. So any questions that you have, any comments that you have, any stories you want to share, whatever comes up for you as we're going through this episode, please let us know, and we will do our best to address you and ask our guests to address you. Yes. So fear is on page 65 in my book. And remembering that when I addressed these wounds, what we attempt to do every single week is go from a historical context right? And connect the dots to today's culture, and then look to the future and how we might demolish these wounds. That's right. So I don't know what that feedback is, but I'll just have to deal with it. I'll back off my mic a little bit, maybe. Throughout the wound section of this book, each time I wrote about a specific wound, it would trigger a battle in my mind. For example, when I rolled up my sleeves to dig down to the roots of fear, I wrestled with fear itself. My job was to expose it, to tell you all how it operates, to show you examples of what it looks like and feels like in action. But fear's job was to avoid being exposed by shaking me to my core. Other wounds were less troublesome because I had already done the work to come to terms with and overcome them. I purposely address fear first. Fear stands alone because it arguably is the most destructive wound of all. Fear is the pivotal linchpin. It is the fuel that powers all other wounds. It gives them a foundation from which to operate, much like a military command post. So keeping that in mind, right, that fear is probably the most destructive wound of all. Let's now move into rejection and think about how fear and rejection might work together to cause the most damage in someone who's having a difficult time accepting who they are, having a difficult time finding their identity, and having a difficult time understanding how they fit into the world, right? So rejection. I'm on page 175. Rejection. Rejection hurts. When we are rejected, it basically signals to us that there's something wrong with us. We're not worthy of being treated respectfully, lovingly, and with compassion. Respect, love, and compassion. We need all three to fully feel human, whole, and fulfilled. Rejection means to be thrown away, cast away. The dictionary says like vomit. This is the description I discovered in my etymological search to describe rejection, but I didn't need a word search to tell me what I felt. And I have a feeling that anyone reading this has been rejected before. We all have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
Take heart. We're in great company. Jesus was rejected too.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, there are a few different categories and levels of rejection. There's the common variety that most people experience in childhood and puberty. It's often associated with the awkwardness of coming into one's own. An example would be wanting to be included in activities like playing sports, being part of various school clubs, trying to fit into a cool kids club, receiving invitations to the best parties. You get the point.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a desire to be welcomed, open arms into something special. As we grow older, the stakes are even higher. We apply for admission to colleges and university, jobs, and other opportunities where we know we could shine if only given the chance.
Mm-hmm.
How many of us have desperately longed for a job we wanted? We may have already begun envisioning all the things we're going to do with that first paycheck. And then it happens. The rejection letter shows up in the mailbox or inbox. Immediately we read the words, "Thank you for applying for the position or for perfect person of the job. However," that one word, however, releases a flood of unworthiness, of not being good enough, and perhaps even deeper levels of this pain, like self-loathing or self-disgust. One of the most prevalent types of rejection is relational rejection. When one is excluded from essential social interactions that form human relationships. Relational rejection is the loss or end of a relationship based on another's perception that there's just something about us that is off, unacceptable, intolerable, or in some cases, grotesque. Then there's the non-starter of a close relationship between two people or two communities for the same basic reasons. Finally, There's the legacy of rejection our ancestors experienced that we inherited and are now still experiencing. We were brought here, planted here, but were never meant to be here after the dirty deed was done. Black Americans have made invaluable contributions to this country, and white Americans are steeped in the benefit of those involuntary contributions. In fact, to this day, the check that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about on his visit to this nation's government has never been paid. He used the metaphor of the check to point to the words of two documents that purportedly hold this country accountable: the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. He said that we should all, no matter the color of our skin, fall heir to the provisions of this check, which has come back to every generation of Black Americans in this country, marked insufficient funds. What Dr. King described is rarely ever invited to the table our ancestors built. I know I've spoken about this before, but it bears repeating in the context of rejection. So, aunties and Christy, does anyone have a response to what was just read?
I do. This is the thing. Even though Martin Luther King had a call to action on our behalf, we still have to answer it. But we can't answer it in our own strength. We need to answer it with the power of the Lord. Just like he made it with the power of the Lord, we have to answer it with the power of God.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to take us a little bit deeper. First of all, is there a dog somewhere?
Oh my God. Yes. Can y'all hear him?
Yeah, we can hear him.
Okay.
That's okay. He just has something to say.
Well, he needs to hush. I might have to go put him up.
Okay, don't worry about it. When you get back,
Okay.
we'll just be talking.
Okay.
So as I was reading Christy's book, one of the things that I recognized immediately is that she came into a situation as a child, right? It wasn't like she was a grown biracial woman who happened to look white and she decided, okay, I'm going to mask and pretend that I'm a white woman so that I can get some, effects and some privilege and something, I can get access to things that Black people don't have. She grew up believing that she literally was white because she was in a small Texas town, right? Where it was the majority white. She was raised by her white mother. Her Black father was gone. She never even had encounters with him per se. And, while there were others who recognized that she wasn't quite fitting in, she didn't quite look like the rest of us, she still had to battle, right, to be able to try to fit in. And her mother never talked to her about these things.
Wow.
They never had a conversation. Her father was gone. Her Black father was gone. So she didn't have her aunties, cousins, and his side of the family to kind of help to acclimate her to America and our issues about, biracialness and racism and all of those things. So can you imagine a small child who doesn't really know anything about these matters? I'm telling them about, Christy, right now, your origins. I'm telling them about your origins, being a child in this southern town with mostly white people, being raised by a white mama, and then a white adopted grandparents, and everyone around you being white, and you're not even realizing at that point that you have a drop of Black blood in you.
Had no clue.
You know that you're white. And I'm just thinking about, your mom never really discussed it with you. Your dad wasn't around. You didn't have your aunties, uncles, cousins, and a Black community to kind of acclimate you to what this is. And so you're struggling with it alone as a child. What was that like?
Well, I mean, as a child, you just kind of, it wasn't painful until I've looked back. I think it's more upsetting as an adult when you look back and think, oh my gosh, this poor, because I really didn't know what was going on. I just knew I wasn't liked. I was rejected. And so I was like, well, I'm going to change that. So whatever it is that is causing them to hate me, well, I'm just going to fix it. You know, I mean, as a kid, there was no other thought. I did know my dad when I was young. He was in and out. I had tons of cousins. Some I still talk to, loved them. I mean, had a relationship. I was little though, like 4,
Okay.
4 or 5. But I remember them, and I still talk to them. And I remember I had an Aunt Zandra, and I still have her. I still know her. But I didn't, as a 4-year-old or however 2, I don't even know how. I still didn't know I was Black. I didn't know my mom was white and my dad was Black. I don't know how to explain that.
No, I get that.
Yeah, it was my dad. Those were my cousins. Like, that was it. It wasn't until I was 10 years old and I went to that new school. It was just, just up the road from the town where I grew up, which was completely different. It was multicultural. But that next little town wasn't. And they were taught that to stay away from people like me. And I didn't realize that I was even half Black until they told me, and they started making fun of me, and they made fun of my hair, and I was like, what? And I literally was like, oh, I am darker. Oh, I do have, I didn't even know. I was the happiest kid. I mean, I was spoiled rotten. No clue. So, and then I was like, well, let's get out the iron, straighten that hair.
So it was like a clothes iron.
Mm-hmm.
Not even a pressing comb.
we didn't have straightening irons back then. Of course, all my family, we didn't know. Nobody knew how to do my hair or how to do anything. That was a whole nother battle, Well,
Mimo was trying though, right?
Mimo tried. Mimo did pretty good. Back in the day, we had VO5 and infusion. She would use that. She did pretty good.
There you go. See, she knew how to get that thing together. So, one of the things that the most powerful line in your entire book is when you say, and I'm paraphrasing, but you say that there was a point where you didn't realize then, but you realize now in the writing and the telling of it, that in your mind, you had segregated yourself against yourself.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So that was when I was much older. And that took a revelation of the Lord. This is hard to explain, but when I realized that my Lord, help me explain. Being Black, I had to make a critical choice. Like, I would hear someone say something racist or, make little slides, whatever. I would literally feel it in my body. I would hate it. But I would make the choice to deny it. I made the choice to just segregate. I just, nope, not gonna go there. I mean, I literally would just turn the other cheek in a bad way.
Wow.
And it wasn't until the Lord completely transformed me and just completely opened my eyes, and I realized what I had done, and I was sick. I mean, I was 36 years old.
Yeah.
And it made me sick to realize what I'd done.
But wasn't that something like survival mode? You're like in a survival mode at that point.
I believe I was.
And the reason why I say that, because I used to live in Texas, and I'm telling you, it is. I mean, the out and out racism that's there. And that was back years ago, but still, the people would just jump in front of you in a line. And, they looked at you as you were nothing. So I'm just imagining what you had to go through. You had to make the choice of being surrounded, and you just had to say, okay, I'm going to make a choice to live. and survive. I understand that.
Yeah.
Right. And to be able to fit in too, because that's all you think about when you're a child,
Oh.
when you're a teenager, you know, is just to fit in. But even later, I wanted to get in a couple of our viewers' comments. Hi, Bridget. Thank you for joining us. And Bridget says, white people don't talk about identity because they don't have to. And you're exactly right, because this land was built by us, but not for us. And the entire system, the whole construct of laws, everything is divided to be skewed toward the power of white people. And so you're right, they don't have to talk about identity. But the next viewer also says, I believe there are many whites with that drop of black blood that may be unknown to them. Well, first of all, I want to say about that, if you have that drop of black blood, you are not considered white in this country. So you are so you're already black, but I understand what you're saying. Someone who has the hue of white, someone being fair like a white person with that drop of black blood, no, they don't know. A lot of times they don't know because, as the first viewer said, white people don't talk about identity because they don't have to. And I don't know. I think in Christy's case, based on what I read, it was more that her mom was trying to protect her.
Yes. Yes.
Protect her. And inadvertently caused more conflict in her mind, because I think that if you had someone to really talk to, like you had the black cousins and all of that, but you were 4 then, and that wasn't the time for that conversation. And I probably would have talked to my 4-year-old about it. My mom probably would have, but we're not from Texas either.
Right.
You know, where it's a whole different environment. Like Auntie Rosemary was saying, I know that Auntie Genoa, you had a question too for Christy that I think is really important. Why don't we ask your question?
Okay, no. When she was talking about when they would make the comments and she could feel it in her bones and everything. Because when I was reading your book, the comment that highlighted was, it was wicked because I was meant to say something, but I had been mute my whole life. I thought that was so. I just felt that all the way down in my bones because as a person of color, we're in spaces where I'm in spaces where sometimes I'll have to do something, but they want me to follow instructions, but they don't want me to ask questions or say anything or anything. Just do like I said. That's it.
Yes, yes. And one of our viewers is saying that it's important to share identity, but that's Bridget again. She's saying that it's important to share identity with biracial children. And I think that it is important to share. And I honestly believe, Christy, you're doing that now with your children, right?
Oh, absolutely. My kids, I might not have said something in school, but my kids do.
Yes.
They come home and tell me stuff. I'm like, you said something, right? I'm like, don't you let them talk like that. So we're getting the ball rolling in my house.
Yes,
yeah, for sure.
Like I said, you know, a lot of times I know that when I wrote Healing the Wounds of American Slavery, there was a process that I had to go through personally, you know, in order to be able to bring what God was trying to download and relay to the public, to his children, to the audience, to secular and Christian and other religious audiences, Black people. That's what I thought I was doing. But then I found out that these wounds are universal, you know, and they are exacerbated in us. But I also realized that in order to tell your story, there's a process that you had to go through. And I can't even imagine what that was to go through that torment. That's what I recognized in, you know, you're living, masking your identity. And you say that you mastered it at one point. And to have that battle, again, going back to that segregation in your mind, to have that battle of at once knowing that I'm white, but also being taught to hate that part of yourself that was Black. How cruel. How cruel of the enemy, right? To inflict that kind of torture on a child. So I really just wanted to hit on that. And also, you know, we have a lot in common. My mom also passed away when she was 48 years old. And so I get you're already struggling with everything that the world is throwing at you. And then, your pillar, one of your pillars is now missing. And for me, like when a mother dies, and I know that our viewers can definitely relate and the aunties can relate, when it's a mother who dies, I know Auntie Genoa's is still here, but it's like they move out of the way and the heat of the sunbeams of the world are just shooting directly down on you. Like you're uncovered all of a sudden. All the things that they guarded us from, all the things that they loved us through, like they're just not there anymore. So to be going through that process and everything that you went through without your mom is just, it's unimaginable. Hi, Jacqueline. She says an entire half of our country today is mute regarding racial equality, racial equity in this country. Yeah, I would say an entire half. I would say more than that, because you know what? Actually, there are a lot of Black Americans who are also in denial because they don't want to face the pain of having to go through their own individual healing to get to the other side of that racial equity conversation. So I think it's more than half. And that's a very good point, that a lot of us don't want to touch that. So I have a question too. Speaking of our moms and your mom's funeral in particular, you said that your dad showed up at your mom's funeral and stood at the back of the church or the home or wherever it was being given and didn't say a word to you. And you also didn't speak to him.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did. Okay, I didn't see that in the book. Okay. You walked past him and you said hello.
Hello.
And he said nothing.
Wow.
How was that for you?
That whole experience is such a blur. That whole probably year surrounding her death is such a, I don't even know. I sang at her funeral. I mean, I don't even remember most of it. But I do remember seeing him, and I remember that my grandpa, her dad, was not there, and that my dad was there. It was so bizarre, and but I mean, I was like, hi, nothing. So I just walked on. But that's really all I.
You know what? I like to say, sorry for interrupting, but do you think that he was in fear of his life? Because I used to live in Killeen, Texas, and the word was kill each and every N-word. It was so bad there.
Yeah.
And what they would come and talk to you, oh, the colored section is over there. I was like, what? I was really shocked. So I don't know. I don't want to make up excuses or anything like that, but I know there's always another side to the story. And sometimes people don't want to, they probably feel less than for not even addressing the daughter. I mean, that is it's very hurtful, very painful. So, I'm just wondering if it could be that bad. Because when I lived there, it was like, oh my God, it was really, really bad towards me. So
yes, and since so much time has gone by, and we've been kind of in and out, trying to have a relationship with him, and then he would withdraw. It's just been really emotionally messy all these years, and so we just backed off. But he has a good, large family too, as well. They're in Kaufman, Texas. Everyone lives there, and but I have, now that I'm an adult and the Lord has revealed to me all of this stuff, I have so much compassion and empathy for my dad, because I'm like, who knows what he had to go through growing up, a Black boy, a Black man in this country. I mean, I know the way that he treated my mom and what he did to us was not right, but I mean, who knows? Who knows what he's carrying, the burdens, and I get that. So I don't judge him. I don't have any hard feelings or anything like that anymore. I used to, I thought he's a jerk and, just whatever, just want to write him off. But now the Lord has opened my eyes, and I'm like, I mean, who knows? So I pray for him all the time, but I'm very close to his brother, his oldest brother. There's a lot, I don't even know, like 6 to 10, I don't know, I have this wrong, but brothers and sisters, all of them together, and he's the oldest, and I'm very close to them, and they actually live in the Killeen area.
Where they they called you the N-word, and the jaw just dropped. It was like ninja.
Yeah. She explains like a couple of times that, you know, like when she was going to a party with her friends, and you know, she arrives there and they're like, what is this N doing here, kind of thing. But I want to take us back a little bit. First of all, one of our viewers, thank you, one of the viewers wants to know if he knew who you were. I believe he knew who you were. Okay. So you didn't really understand the difference between yourself and the other white kids until you were in 5th grade, about 10 years old.
Right, I was 10.
Right?
It was 1991.
Right. And then
it was made clear.
You found out that you were Black,
and
you were disgusted.
I mean, I wasn't really I guess I was disgusted because they were disgusted.
Right. So you found out you were disgusting to them.
To them, yeah.
Got you.
So them, it was disgusting. And so in order, I decided I was going to be in their group. I was going to be accepted. So then therefore I thought it was disgusting.
And so then that's when you started trying to change and fit in and all of that. Because I think a lot of us, again, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, I think we need to wake this up again, is that when people approach this conversation about passing, I think a lot of us, I won't speak for all of us because I don't know everyone who's Black, but I'll say that I think a lot of Black Americans say to themselves, you know, well, the reason that she's doing this is because she just wants all the privileges that go with being white. But look at where it started for Christy. This is like, you know, when she's a baby, she's 5 years old. I mean, I'm sorry, 5th grade, 10 years old, when she first even discovers that, you know, there's something different. And that's because someone else from the outside of her family, with no empathy, no compassion on it, no understanding whatsoever, but utter disgust. Ooh, you're Black, you know. So it caused an identity crisis, right? Which is what led to the rest of it. So I wanted to read a little bit also on self-hatred. Because I recognize that in that pattern of feeling that extreme shame and that others were looking at you. You didn't think it was disgusting, but others looking at you as if you were disgusting. You were dirty. There was something somehow wrong with you, right? And so I'm going to page 114 in the book, and I'm going to read just a little bit about self-hatred. There's a part of our brains called the amygdala. It regulates our current emotions. When we're angry, it heats up, and when we're calm, it cools down. Could it be that it is time to cool the heat of our internal battles to begin again? The kind of shame that victimizes Black Americans is of the most cynical variety. It works together with other wounds to keep us perpetually stuck. Again, we feel the need to hide. Pastor Moki refers to all people when he writes, the more shame we experience, the more anger comes in. The more anger, the more anxiety we feel. The more anxiety, the more guilt is laid on. The more guilt, the more depression. You then have a vicious cycle of unhappiness and self-loathing. Now, couple that with the generational inheritance of anger, anxiety, depression, and pain Black people experience. Can you see how shame affects us even more than others? You see, shame has nothing to do with our personal character at all. It's a stigma that we carry based on others' ideals of who we are, like our ancestors who were seen as animals, literal beasts of burden like cows or horses. And I just want to talk about what it must have been like for the vows that you took based on perhaps your own self-hatred at that point, not intentional, but just because of the situation. And kind of trying to juggle that juggling act of, I know I'm Black, but how do I be that? And now that emotional splitting. And you also say that in your fight for survival, you took vows.
Yeah.
Right. And just to be able to blend in. And it reminded me of like the chameleon, right? The little lizard that changes color from environment to environment. But after a while, when you change yourself so much, it throws you off center from your true identity. So the more you're wrestling to survive, the more you're departing from your original divine identity. And so it was just a cruel, vicious game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And two, I wanted to say that I didn't put this in my book, but it's something that has been revealed to me, is that a lot of what I believed stemmed from a biblical understanding that I was given that was a lie, was a myth that I grew up with. It was, and I didn't even know this at the time of writing my book. This has come out after that, but I was taught somewhere, I don't know who it was, I don't know where I was, but I was told that about the curse of Cain. There's some.
Oh, yeah.
Have y'all heard that? Okay. Somewhere in my childhood, that was spread to me. So I thought that not only, it wasn't just my peers, when I was 10, that God even but he was just so nice to pardon me and let me live. That's just, and so it wasn't just people. I felt like God agreed. So I believed that he was just being nice to me, letting me live. It's absolutely insane when you think about it.
It is insane.
Wow.
It is insane. Hi, Michelle. Michelle McIntyre says, I am mixed race. My dad was from Guyana in South America. And from a young age, he taught me to identify myself as Guyanese. And that was my culture. And so what's the other part of your culture? Was your mom white then? Was she white American? Was she Dutch? What was she? And as Michelle is getting ready to tell us about that, I'm going to go to another part of the book, another part of self-hatred. It's on page 101. Self-hatred is not easy to defeat. I've been at it for a very long time. A lot of us battle with this. I merely mentioned the title of my book in the presence of a sister from the South. And she left her job post to tell me all about her own relationship with self-hatred. I stood there listening for nearly half an hour while she emptied herself of enough heart-wrenching details so she could actually continue her day in relative peace, temporarily at least, from her self-hatred wounds. Just the mention of the name Healing the Wounds of American Slavery made this girl leave her job post to go talk to me more about what it is that I had to say. Her mom was white English. Okay, got you. Self-hatred is merciless in its ability to steal, kill, and destroy our self-esteem. But before we go too much further, let's start by thinking about what self-hatred really is. Self is one's own person. Hate is spite, envy, malice, and hostility. So broken down into comprehensible pieces, self-hatred starts with thoughts that lead to torturous and harassing thoughts and actions toward ourselves. My father would sometimes call my brothers and me little niggas. He did it pretty regularly and in a most casual way. This was a Black man. What he thought was affectionate, as if he just called us little apple dumplings or by our names. I didn't realize why he did that or the impact that it had on my spirit until much later. It was Dad's last birthday, October 2nd, 2018, 5 short months before his death. Michael and I were in Oakland for it. In fact, we hosted his birthday party because we knew he was not doing well and it might not be long. During the celebration, my youngest sister's mother, Dad's mate of about 30 years, she's white, he's Black, I have a half sister, biracial sister, thought that it would add a nice touch to bring out some of Dad's family photo albums. I had not seen these before. And suddenly here they were, my dad's relatives in black and white, frozen in time. Because my father never talked about his father, except to say that SOB was no good. And then that was the end of the conversation. So apparently, a distant cousin was nice enough to duplicate and send them miraculously that particular group of photos, which had patches of stories and little descriptions written on the back. Judging by the expressions etched into their faces, the common themes among Dad's people were anger, pain, and stress. They appeared to be in the depths of struggle for years. Alzheimer's and dementia had robbed Dad of his ability to recall the stories, names, and details, so he couldn't tell us much. But the folks in the photos seemed to insist on sort of speaking for themselves. They spoke volumes to me of my history. One lady, I believe, was my great-grandmother, Nancy. She went first. Quote, "Little girl, you ain't ever got nothing to complain about. You don't know nothing about this kind of heartache and pain," was bouncing off this photo at me. Gradually, as I sat, slowly sifting through these images, old Negro spirituals struck up sad melodies in my mind.
Wow.
Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Sorrowful.
Wow.
Yep. That's a good word for what these folks look like. They looked like life had pounded them into the ground relentlessly for decades with no rest. They looked battle weary.
Wow.
Fortunately for me, though, they also looked majestic, strong, and proud. There was not 1 ounce of quit in them. Like they would fight anyone or anything to the death in order to survive. Check this. They were beautiful, but deeply troubled.
Yes.
Wow.
Right? So at once, you know, you're battling this battle where you're beautiful, but you can't even enjoy the beauty.
I get that.
Because of the self-hatred.
Right.
And the self-hatred also causes, even among Black Americans, right, to, we could talk about crabs in a bucket and all of that, but it's like we're looking at each other through a mirror. We're mirroring each other. And that self-hatred, when we see something that we hate in another one of us, right, whether she be biracial, whether he be biracial, or, you know, there's not a one of us. I dare anyone who was born in America as a descendant of slaves to say that they are purely 100% African.
Right.
Right. And when we're reflecting that self-hatred back to each other, it makes us do and say things that we would not normally do if we were aware of it. Now, I'm going to be quiet because I really want to hear from the aunties tonight.
Well, you know what? I'm so glad you said that because I have a lot of experience dealing with. I mean, growing up, there was 6 children, and we had 3 dark skinned and there's 3 light skinned, but we wasn't raised like you were life and you were better and anything like that. So it wasn't until I became an adult. But I used to hear the little tidbits of my grandmother would say, "Oh, come here, red gal," you know, talking to one of my sisters, or you know, it would say things like that. But you know, you hear it, but you're a child, you're not really thinking about it. It wasn't until I became an adult, and I was in my 20s, when I got out into the world, and I realized, you know, the guys were saying things like, you know, you're kind of cute for a dark-skinned girl, things like that, or you know, I like the lighter side, you know, because she got lighter eyes. It's just, you know, and it wasn't kind of a stab, but that was all new to me. I didn't realize that until I got out in the world, because we wasn't taught that way. But I had a friend. I had 2 friends actually, and one was dark and one was light. And you know, we would you know, meet on the weekends and just talk and chit chat and smile and things. And I noticed the darker skin, it was like she hated my guts. But
Mm.
but the other friend was like, she loved her. She loved her and everything was good about her. It was nothing. And I was like, why is she attacking me? I didn't even realize the self-hatred that she was dealing with until years later. I was like, oh, that's what she was
Mm.
dealing with. I didn't even realize that she hated her own self and she hated me too because I looked like her. Both of us was dark.
Right.
So,
And
Mm.
you know what's interesting about what you're talking about is that that comes out of the caste system that was used to pit some of the slaves against other slaves, like the dark skin against the light skin. I mean, the
right.
old against the young, the field hands against the house hands, and all of this. But at the
Mm.
same time, that's a great demonstration of it. And I wanted to also bring up how, when the masters would rape the black women and they would come out with these biracial children,
Mhm, mhm.
at first it wasn't an issue, right? It wasn't an issue because the master was the master. He owned all the slaves. And so there was nothing anybody could say or do about it. But then there came the question of inheritance,
Yes.
Mm.
because who's going to inherit this property and the slaves when the master dies, when he has all these children running
Mhm.
around. And so there were actually laws enacted
Yes.
that if a child was born to a black slave mother, that they were then considered a slave, and then
Mm.
and so they could not inherit the
No.
property. But here's really the strange part for me is that the slave masters were running around raping all the black women, right? Creating these biracial children.
Mhm.
But then, as we end slavery and we come into Reconstruction and the Civil Rights era, even prior to the Civil Rights era, during Jim Crow is when it happened.
Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
when they started enacting laws that blacks couldn't marry whites because it's just a dirty thing for the races to mix and mingle.
Mm.
Dirty,
Mhm.
then what were you doing back there?
Right.
Mhm.
And now you have to enact a law about it. So it's just insane. The
Mhm.
Mhm.
dichotomy of all of that is just
Mhm.
literally insane.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
Auntie
my point
Rich,
was the self hatred and where it springs from. That's
Mm.
what I was trying to make that point.
Mhm.
yes, and you did, and we totally get that because you were saying that your dark skinned cousin, right, or friend, I guess it was,
Friend.
you were reflecting back
Mhm.
who she was, and she didn't like it, so therefore she said, or it looked like she didn't like you.
She didn't like me.
Christy, this is
Mm.
something I really want us to get to before we leave tonight. I
Okay.
think it is so incredible. uh, and we've got a question up from a viewer, and then I'll come back to it. I learned I could embrace my Black culture, or embrace a multicultural approach, or a multi-ethnic approach, embrace a common sense approach. I was 28 when I learned it. Well, you learned something that a lot of people don't learn even into their 70s
Yeah.
and 80s. And she said, after that, I came out as no racial when I wanted to, but for years I was passing as a light-skinned Black.
Mm.
Passing as a light-skinned Black. Wow, that's an interesting concept.
That's my strawberry sister.
The strawberry sister. So
That's
I
my
wanted to make room for Christy to tell us how God used Meghan Markle
Oh,
as a way for you to come into, your identity and who you are, and break all of that. So,
he's still using her. So I had never heard of her, and when the Lord started all this, I was at a lunch table. I was a teacher, sitting with other teachers. We get like 10 minutes to inhale our lunch, and somebody made the comment and had gotten out. It was a secret that I kept. No one knew I was biracial. Everyone assumed I was Hispanic. No one ever thought I was white. No one ever guessed that I was white. They always thought I was Hispanic. And so I would just go with it. I wouldn't say I was or I wasn't. I would just not say anything. So it had gotten out, and a teacher said, "Oh, I didn't know you're biracial." And that was the first time I was confronted with it like that in front of my peers. 36 years old, pretty ridiculous. And what ended up happening was nobody at that table cared. They said, which was a complete surprise to me because I hadn't talked about it since 1991. So I still thought that everyone was going to be the way they were when I was 10, and growing up. But they weren't. And so one of the teachers was like, "Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful." And she just went on. And she said, "Do you know who you look like?" And I'm like, "Who?" And at this time I had straight blondish hair. And she said, "Meghan Markle." And I was like, "Who is that?" I had no idea. who it was. So I went home that night. I looked her up and I learned who she was, and I could not believe it. And I went home. I got through my afternoon classes. It was so hard because I just thought my life was over. I mean, it was my deepest, darkest secret was now revealed to my colleagues. And I thought, I have no life. I'm over. And I was laying in bed crying, and I looked her up on my phone, and I realized her birthday, same year. She was born 2 days before me, biracial. And then she was about to marry Harry, and he has red hair, and my husband has red hair, and I tell people he's not a prince. I mean, he's very close. He's a pastor, which is kind of, we're still in the public or whatever, but not as massive as she is. But it was just, so God has used her to, I mean, it's like, what, and even when I looked, I was so, like I said, my own mind, it was so jacked up that I told Laura, I'm like, wait a minute, what? We can't do that. She's biracial. How is she going to be a princess? We can't do that. We're not allowed to do that. And the Lord's like, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, you are. And so he's used her to show me what he's been trying to tell me, all these years. So, and just watching their story, even now, still, all that she has to put up with. And it's just, I mean, I totally relate. I get it. Hers is just on a more massive scale.
Yeah. And so I was reading that on the day of the wedding, as she was approaching the throne, she was approaching this altar, that, you identified with, as a child of the Most High King, you identified with her. And the dignity and the integrity and just the strength and all of those things that she had. And so you could then kind of link shields with that identity and come more into your own as the woman that you are, and all of that entails. And so we have a comment from, hello, Dr. Ivanka. She says, I have met white women with biracial grandchildren that are frustrated when their grandchildren identify as Black. I've met those too. She feels that their identity as Caucasian is being abandoned. Wow, now that's interesting. And you know what? The reason that phenomenon is interesting to me is because, yes, the grandmother would rather that they identify as Caucasian, but society has told them, and not just told them, but our whole cultural construct supports the idea that one drop of Black blood, that goes all the way back to D.W. Griffith, the so-called father of film in this country. When media and propaganda was first coming into play through television, through film at that time, because film was first. But those images and that propaganda told us that if you had one drop, we used to just talk about that so much in film school, like one drop of Black blood. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
There was a little dab of do you. A little dab of do you.
A little dabble, do you? I saw the most amazing video on TikTok where this white mother was explaining to her children who had been at school, they had a Black father, and so they were, like caramel color, and they were being teased at school, and the kids were wondering, like, what are you? Well, what are you? What are you? And so Mama got out a cup of coffee and some cream, and she said, this cup of coffee is Daddy, and it probably was, because it was black and hot. And the cream was Mama. And she said, so when Daddy and Mommy came together and she poured the cream into the coffee, she let the children stir it. She said, now who does that look like?
Oh.
And they were like, it looks like me. And so I think that our first viewer was right, that there's no shame. I get it when you're living in an environment where people are really, we go back to fear. We go back to fear on both sides of this issue. If there are sides, because really at the end of the day, the only side is God's side, in my opinion. But if let's just, for the sake of this conversation and semantics, let's say there are two sides, that that it's fearful for both sides. It's fearful on the white side of the issue, because the history of this country is that if we empower Black people too much, they're going to take over.
Mm-hmm.
The fear on the other side is that we just don't want to deal with this to some extent. We'll just be who we are and be empowered as Black people and just do what we can do. It's just interesting, and I'm getting the signal that we're ready to wrap. And so we would love to have you come back for part 2, because there's so much more that we want to delve into in the book, and definitely your journey, and just really invite people to take a hard, cold look at what's going on, and then also bring hope on the other side of that, because we definitely want to believe that. And the hope here is that what, Christy? What's the hope for us with regards to this?
The hope is that there is hope, that the Lord has brought this up. It's time to talk about it. Silent, we're done. Those days are over. And I know people think I'm crazy. Go ahead. I honestly 100% believe there is going to be a generation. I think we're seeing it. There is going to be a generation that's going to look back and go, what? Like, not be able to believe the way that our churches were segregated. They won't be able to believe what Dr. King said, that 11 o'clock was the most segregated hour. They're going to be like, what was he talking about? They're not going to know anything. That is my dream. That's the hope. I know, because God's put it in my spirit. I know it. I know it. It's what's coming. It's already started. We already see it. It just needs exposure. And I think the Lord has opened the door wide open.
For sure.
Amen.
For sure. And I know that the healing aspect of it is the most hopeful for me, because what that does is it takes out the finger pointing, it takes out the blame, it takes out, the fear of one another. It just boils it down to what's in your own heart. Work on you. Because when you work on you, when I encounter someone else, right, then we're working from a clean slate. Right. So, we've got work to do, though. It's not a pie in the sky dream. We've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be hard.
I'm going to go ahead and wrap. I will let you know that Christy's book is available on Amazon. It is Naturally Curly, a memoir by Christy Sanders Lasher.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that someone is going to drop that in the comments for us. My book is Healing the Wounds of American Slavery. I am Paige Means Hopper. It's been a pleasure hosting you, Christy.
Thank you for having me.
And we're definitely going to have you come back again so we can go a little bit more into depth, because this is a very powerful conversation. It's a timely conversation. She's amazing. Bridget says her family and church is blessed. There is hope. Thank you, aunties. Thank you, Bridget, for being here with us. And you're right, she is absolutely amazing. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you for coming. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your questions. We invite all of that. And we just want to let you know that we're your aunties. You can tell us anything. But there's a way to say everything. Good night, and have a great rest of your week.
Good night.
Hey, auntie.